7 p.m. Welcome, everybody. Some of us have very nice haircuts, I see.
Nope.
Took a long time.
It's getting there, yes. But tonight, on the heels of what we talked about last week with program music, I wanted to go in the other direction in the 19th century with Johannes Brahms. And really focus, Brahms is such an important figure in classical music, especially in chamber music. There's no more important voice in the 19th century. It's arguable that, he's just where it's at. But in on the heels of program music, in the after Beethoven, you had this split of factions. With program music, it was Berlioz, and then Liszt, and then Wagner, and then Bruckner, and then Mahler. And then you had this other branch that was Mendelssohn, Schumann, Brahms. And this branch tended to be still focused on the forms and structures that had happened previously, meaning Beethoven especially. Beethoven was really the sort of shining light to these composers. But what they did with those forms and how they innovated those forms and how they further developed those forms, that's what made them so unique and why we still experience that music. But Brahms is a very specific and a very interesting character in music history. Brahms really was a traditionalist. He really worshipped Beethoven, absolutely worshipped Beethoven, and was called to task by people like Wagner and Bruckner and those things, but for being old school. Like, why are you focusing on all of those forms and symphonies and sonatas and things like that? We're doing all this great stuff. Why are you doing this? But Brahms, with his extraordinary craft, brought forth in this music and his innovative approach to the old forms, made it all the more new and special during this time. There's a very famous essay by Schoenberg, our favorite composer, of course. Schoenberg, I believe the essay appeared in the 1910s, and it was called Brahms the Progressive. And he wrote an essay about how Brahms was completely and extraordinarily innovative in his field at the time, that people should not just be all obsessed with the harmonic nature of Wagner and using the Tristan chord, the never resolving harmonies and chromatic harmonies that took place. Brahms was an innovator. Brahms did it subtly through his extraordinary craft, and that's why he's so relevant. I, for one, I'm sure I'm not alone. I have a very special affinity for Brahms's music, especially in the chamber music. He was a perfectionist and burned many of his works, and who knows what other works that he had, but each work of chamber music and his piano literature they're just masterpieces. And we have this repertoire available to us that's worth spending an hour on. I mean, it's ridiculous to actually spend only an hour on Brahms, and maybe we can expand upon that. But I thought I'd give it the old college try and do it on the heels of program music. But that's really why I wanted to do Brahms tonight. I wanted, we focused on program music and specific visualizations and pictures of music. And now we talk about Brahms, who brings these stayed and older constructs, and then innovates and produces obvious emotion and communicates directly. I can't speak to what Brahms was feeling, but certainly there's a sense of what he could be feeling and what he wanted to communicate through the music. So I thought tonight we would play some music, again, reflect upon how we feel about that music, what we think the music is communicating to us. It will not be, for those of you who were with us last week, it will not be so specific. There's not a specific picture that he's painting, but rather it's a more subjective feeling about what you're hearing and what you think he's doing. And then maybe we can put it in the context of what was happening in Brahms's life at the time. So that's what we'll be doing tonight. And I'll be playing 4 selections for you, 2 solo piano works and 2 works of mixed chamber music. And then we'll talk about what you think Brahms was going for in this music and how you feel what he's trying to communicate emotionally to us. And I featured, and again, I'm never going to bury the lead, Paul Lewis. I mentioned in my email. Paul is a dear friend of mine, a dear friend of the series, and one of the truly great pianists, frankly, in the world today. And he will be a mainstay at our series as long as I'm around, because I think he's just extraordinary. But before I even get started with playing a recording of Paul's, I want to tell you, just give a little plug. This week, he's appearing twice on the internet live. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., Emmanuel Axe in Carnegie Hall have been hosting these talks and performances. And Manny Axe is going to be interviewing Paul and talking to him about his work with Alfred Brendel. And then Paul will be playing some of the Beethoven bagatelles. And that's tomorrow at 2 p.m. At Carnegie Hall's website. And on Wednesday, Wigmore Hall has started to stream live performances from their hall. It's an empty hall with commentary from their artistic director. And they're very wonderful. And they're noontime concerts, 1 o'clock concerts in London. So they appear at 8 a.m. Our time. It's a great way to start the day with your cup of coffee and breakfast. I mean, it's just really wonderful. So Paul is going to be streamed live from Wigmore Hall's website on Wednesday at 8 a.m. And he's performing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata and the Schubert G Major Sonata. So 2 major works in his Germanic wheelhouse. So you should definitely check that out. But first, let's start the evening with a selection from Paul. This is going to be an early work of Brahms. It's the Ballade, Opus 10, number 1. It's a set of 4 ballades that he wrote. It's 1854, so he was 21 years old when he wrote these pieces. So let's give a listen. This performance is from March 18th, 2016. And let's give a listen, and then let's talk about what we're feeling afterwards. Okay. And here we go. Brahms, Ballade, Opus 10, number 1, Paul Lewis. Short and sweet.
Derek, was this written before or after Schumann died? He was 21 when he died, you know.
It's before, 2 years before he died.
Okay.
Derek,
So,
for me, this piece is, because Brahms's Opus 1 was a piano piece and the last pieces he wrote were piano pieces, I just feel this meditative quality about it. I can picture him there. He's 21, but this certainly isn't an exuberant piece. It's a very thoughtful piece. And I think Brahms was pretty autumnal right from the very beginning. There are always elements of that, not bleak, not morbid, but he just seemed to, from the earliest works, have the quality of late in life, and I sense it even here. I can just picture him working this out on the keyboard, and it's very, very profound already. Opus 10. It's a great piece.
yeah. Other thoughts?
More experimental than the others, his harmonies and so forth. He's not as traditional as Beethoven and so forth.
Certainly. As a general comment of his music, yes, I would agree. What is the tone of this piece?
Melancholy.
Melancholy.
At times it sounds like Schumann, but it's not Schumann.
It's
I
not
was
Schumann.
listening to Schumann in the car this afternoon, and I can still sort of hear it in my head, and this is definitely not Schumann. But it sounds a little bit like Schumann, but it's not.
And he also goes back and forth pretty quickly between major and minor. We hear slipping from one to the other. We hear this gesture 3-against-2, which became a real hallmark in all of his writing. So lots of what he did subsequently was there in this piece.
Absolutely. That's a very specific comment about his compositional technique, about melding duple against triple, and this, which creates a floating nature. He has the triplets in the left hand and the right hand. But autumnal. I'm getting a sense of autumnal. I find a certain solemnity.
Yeah.
To this piece. I think there's something very important happening in this piece. I feel a weight. Do you agree? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, a kind of deliberate quality. I said meditative initially, and I think that there's that going on. So, yeah, solemnity, perhaps. Yeah.
I found he was exploring different paths and different routes, and then he seemed to bring them all together to this height of beautiful sounds, beautiful harmonies. I really enjoyed the way he did that, and then brought it back down again to a quiet place. I love that.
Well, this is, in these pieces and in most all of these choices this evening, there'll be an A section that's a certain quality, a B section that's a quality that's contrary to that quality, and then generally returning to the A. There's differentiation in the moods. This is a very, almost, there's a darkness to the beginning of this piece. And you don't really, the meter is unclear in this piece. You don't know, is this in 3? Is this in 2? Is this in 4? It sort of just floats in a fog out there.
To me, there is a great deal of sorrowfulness in it.
Yes, I agree.
It was held by that almost to me. Even the height of it, when it would go up, when we get a little excited or there'd be a height in it, the height still had sorrow in it, I thought.
It's an introduction to something that's going to happen. You just feel that something not too good is going to happen.
Excellent.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
So
it's like it could be background music for a movie.
So, Paul mentioned about, his early piano works and his late piano works. He was a pianist, Brahms. He wasn't a virtuoso by any stretch. He was a very good pianist, but he wasn't Clara Schumann. He wasn't Beethoven. He wasn't one of these pianists. But his first works right out of the gate are these piano sonatas. He wrote 3 piano sonatas before he wrote this piece. And they're these extraordinarily virtuosic tour de forces, flurries of notes and passions and things. And you don't really hear those sonatas played very often, do you? Rarely hear a Brahms piano sonata, and you would think that a forebearer of Beethoven would certainly have, expended energies composing piano sonatas. The Opus 10 set of ballades is Brahms's first foray into smaller ideas with piano music. And the ballade, the first composer of ballades was who? Chopin. Chopin invented the ballade. And a ballade basically tells a story. So Brahms says, okay, I'm going to take this sort of idea of this character piece and make it my own. And so he this is a transition for Brahms in his career, where he wrote these 3 piano sonatas. He also wrote this set of theme and variations on Schumann, hyper virtuosic, really, really just a million notes. You should listen. They're wonderful pieces, but they're just, this is something different. This is the beginning of something different for him. And what's most interesting, and I'm again being tricky because that's who I am, is that this piece is actually programmatic. Ooh. So, I was going back to my Jan Swafford biography of Brahms, and I recommended that in my readings of Brahms, as well as the Geiringer biography, which was written in the 30s. So this is actually a very specific story. And I wrote down the story because it's a little convoluted, and it's in the score. And perhaps I should, I'm going to share my screen. So here is the score. So it's based on a ballade called Edward, in a set from Herder Stimmen von Wilker. Okay? And Edward, as I've surmised, and believe me, I didn't know this specifically listening to this piece, but it's a Scottish ballad where it's a dialogue between a mother and a son, the son being Edward, and Edward comes with a sword with blood on his sword. And there are questions back and forth like, what happened? What's with the blood on the sword? And it turns out he killed his own hawk. And then throughout the course of the ballad, we determined that the hawk is actually his father. And in the last line of the ballad in the poem, it is his mother who encouraged him to kill the hawk, his father.
Ooh,
And that's what this piece is.
that's crazy.
So Amy White, you are pretty. That's a great. This is a very solemn, serious, mournful situation that's happening here.
Derek,
Yes.
just toss in about that ballad. When the mother greets Edward at the door, she knows exactly what's been done because she said to do it. And she, in a very extraordinary psychological and twisted way, she says, "Where's that blood from?" And he says, "From my hawk." And she says, "No, your hawk's blood was never so red." And,
That's right.
and she says, "Tell me more." And he says, "Well, it was from my horse." And she says, "Well, you shouldn't worry because you've got other horses." And she lures him into the confession, which is fabulous. So, but thank you for making the connection between the music and the story.
So Brahms actually reset this text specifically for I believe it's a duet, a vocal duet, Opus 75, number 1, where he sets Edward, and it's literal, and the music is literal. And you should go explore that. I didn't want to get too deep into this one piece and this one song this evening, but it's fascinating. So Brahms, rather than, he sets the stage, and you hear a dialogue, a little, there's a dialogue, but it's not exacting as the other programmatic music that we heard last week. He takes it as his own, and that's what he did. And he really never did it throughout the course of his career. This is really the closest he ever gets in his career to program music. So,
Derek, do we know why Brahms at age 21 did this?
no, I could not find any evidence.
This is an amazing, piece of music to begin with, but especially for a 21-year-old.
Yes.
Kill his father?
We can talk about that. Brahms had problems with his father. Brahms's father was a bassist in the Hamburg Orchestra, and he was abusive and an alcoholic, and Brahms had a very difficult upbringing. and was very, very close with his mother. Very, very close with his mother. And on that cheery note, again, it's always getting pretty deep down. I want to play a piece that's close to my heart as a former horn player. We're going to listen to a movement of the Brahms Horn Trio, which was written in 1865. And we're going to hear a performance by musicians from the Marlborough Music Festival. And this is a performance from March 25th of 2007. The players are pianist Anna Polonsky, who's appeared on the series several times, violinist Subin Kim, who's also been on the series a few times, and who I think is the best horn player in the world, frankly, and I'm a former horn player, is Radovan Vlatkovich. So we're going to listen to the third movement of the Brahms Horn Trio, Opus 40. Okay, here we go. And oh, I'm sorry, before we start, please remember to mute your screens if you can. That would be wonderful during the music. Thank you.
Had a lot of different moods in there. I loved when they were taking turns talking back and forth between the two instruments. And then they became very intense. And then they had a lovely duet together, and the things were calm and comprising some of the resolutions to the harmony. And then more intensity, and then it just seemed like it really got sadder and sadder.
The chromaticism at the beginning, the kind of searching for a place at the beginning, all of them, and then towards the end of the piece, this wonderful kind of sunny opening up where things go from minor to major, and all of the kind of the cloudiness is dispelled. And I play piano, so for me, I was just listening to how low in the register the piano was working, all the darkness, and that of course is right for a horn to complement the low voice of the horn. Derek, did you ever play this?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Oh yeah, wow, what a piece.
Anyone else? What were you feeling as you listened to this?
He was walking through a place he once visited, remembering different things as he proceeded through room to room.
I was just struck by the remarkable craftsmanship in using the instruments to their maximum. It was just so idiomatic for the horn and for the piano and the violin. And someone made the comment before about the conversation. There's a lot of sections have this kind of fugal quality and conversational quality with mimicking the motifs that one instrument brought. But it's marvelous craftsmanship, and he was so meticulous in what he did. I'm one of those people who has a hard time trying to translate into words what the music is saying, because I remember that notion that when someone asked the composer, what does the music mean, they just simply played the piece again instead of trying to put it into words, because if you put it into words, you wouldn't have to write it in the music. Like poetry translating to prose doesn't work, because if it were articulable in prose, you wouldn't have to write the poem about it. But it's as you say, it's as you all said, it's a very, very beautiful piece. I'm reminded a little bit of the wonderful craftsmanship and beauty of the motifs in the clarinet trio, which I've played as a cellist. But it's a remarkable composer and just so beautiful from beginning to end. And thank you for playing it for us.
Well, if we can't put it into words, I'm going to wish everybody a good night. No, you're right. I get the sentiments. What I'd like, and I think this movement is specifically communicating something. Even in the tempo marking, which I'm not revealing yet, it's revealing something, and Shirley alluded to it.
Well, I think of it as calmness.
I think of it as a kind of yearning. Someone, and it's in 3. Am I right? Is it 3/4?
6/8.
6/8. Okay. Yeah.
It's the 8th note is the beat. So the marking of this movement is adagio mesto. Sad. And Brahms wrote the horn trio, and I mean, for me, to have played the horn and to have this in our repertoire is just a huge privilege. Yeah. This is one of Brahms's great chamber works. If you don't know the piece, you really should. But Brahms wrote this piece upon the death of his mother.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And there is a great sadness throughout the piece. Mm-hmm. In the first movement, and especially I wanted to focus on this movement, and he marks it adagio mesto. sad. And there's a glimmer of hope when he goes major in the middle. And it's he uses the horn call, the open fifths of a horn call in the violin, so it's sort of a pastoral sense in the middle, but it's about sadness. And this movement, it has one of the great climaxes in all of Brahms's music toward the end of the piece. It's an extraordinary piece. And I think I just finished saying prior that he had a very problematic relationship with his father, and his mother. He was very close to his mother, and his mother protected him often. And he had a hard time leaving Hamburg, and actually came back and took a job to conduct a woman's chorus when he was a young man, just to stay close to his mother. And when she passed away, it was a very profound loss for Brahms in his life. And here it is, Opus 40, 1865. He's at the height of his compositional abilities at this point. And he brings us this marvelous expression of grief for his mother.
And of course the Requiem that comes not so long after that.
That's correct. Exactly.
About his mother as well. So these two pieces obviously reflect that love. Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
Question, Derek: Is it unusual to have a 6/8 with in an adagio tempo? Because I also, when it first sounded, it sounded more like a 3/4 time. Is that the uncommon, or is that is it?
No, I would not say it's uncommon. No. I don't really have a further response to it. I mean, that happens often. It's a matter of whether it's felt a la breve in the larger beats or with the eighth notes, and it's just, yeah, he just notated it in 6/8 time. But truly, if you don't know the Brahms horn trio, you should. And I can direct you. There's a facet. My favorite recording is from Marlborough. And it's a recording from the late 60s of Rudolf Serkin playing piano, Myron Bloom playing horn, who was the principal horn of the Cleveland Orchestra under George Zell. And the violinist, interestingly enough, was Michael Tree. And why is that interesting anymore?
Yeah, he wasn't he was a violist.
Because Michael Tree was he was also a violinist. Michael Tree gave his New York debut as a violinist, but he gained fame as the violist of the Guarneri Quartet. So seek out that recording. That's a great recording. And even more interesting is that Serkin recorded the Brahms horn trio back in 1933 with his father-in-law, Adolf Busch, playing violin, and Aubrey Brain playing horn, who was the father of the great horn player Dennis Brain. And that recording is available. And to hear those two recordings, it's really worth checking out. You should definitely check it out. I think my hearing of the 1933 recording really changed my perspective entirely on this piece. So you should really check it out.
Derek, can I ask a question? You started our hearing this by telling the story of the mother and and killing the bird, namely the husband, and to start our listening to that by telling that story. So when I was listening, I was trying to incorporate or interpret or do something with that story, which is so wild, on top of all of this sadness and this huge intimacy between Brahms and his mother, as we hear it in this music. And so I was wondering, it was sort of a very peculiar piece of information to to come to the music with as well. And I couldn't do anything with it, but I kept wondering, and I just wonder what was in your head about about, or what? How do you handle that story with that music? I don't know if it's too much of a intellectual question, but
The story, I just want to be clear. The story of the story with the relationship of his mother?
yes, as in relation to the story of the boy coming back having shot, the bird, but the bird.
Possibly.
It's just a curiosity. I mean, it is.
That, and then they will-
It's in the music somehow, but I don't know. Anyway, I just.
No, I think they're both reflective of a close relationship with the mother. But at the end of the ballade, he is angry at his mother for having him kill the father.
Right.
So it's slightly different.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Can I
then
ask-
the
I'm sorry.
lovely fifth movement of the Requiem when it's directed at her and a message and all. It's just lovely.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. Amazing.
It's very, very beautiful.
Yes.
Can I ask, just, this is a specific question, but it has kind of general implications. When we talk about, and you already pointed out that Brahms was kind of the counterpole to the program music tradition and, more in the pure musicality tradition, and yet he was conveying these kinds of emotions. It's clear, I mean, this is deeply sad. The music comes across as deeply sad. Would you think that the expectation while he composed it was to evoke in the listener a sense of the loss parallel to the loss that he felt for his mother? Or was it to convey a sense of sadness? I ask that, I say it's general because even last week when we talk about a composer doing a painting in music, is the attempt by the composer to express in music what he, and a woman composer, she was feeling in experiencing that experience? Or was it also an attempt to evoke in the listener an evocation of that kind of scene or that kind of feeling?
Impossible for me to say. That being said, I think this is an expression of grief in music.
Yes.
I think this is an outpouring of his grief over the death of his mother.
And he still uses the lower register.
It's darkness, and this has to do with the horn.
Yeah.
You have to. Yeah, I can speak for 3 hours on this piece. I can go on about this piece. He scored it for Waldhorn, which is a forest horn. And this was and that implies using a natural horn, which is without valves.
Mm-hmm.
And during the time of this piece, a valved horn was there. So there's question for the performance practice of whether you should play it without valves, or was he trying to evoke a certain darkness of the valveless horn and the valved horn? I ascribe to the second, to the latter. I think there's a darkness to this piece that's inherent, and you speak to the low register in the piano, and I think that's part of it. In that particular performance, Radovan Vlatkovich actually utilized some natural horn technique where he stopped the sound in the bell, and that's very specific for horn playing, blah blah blah. But he sort of juxtaposed the aesthetic in the performance of the piece, which I found really fascinating. I like talking about the Brahms horn trio. Okay, so
Derek, you could just talk about the horn in any of Brahms's pieces, the orchestral pieces,
yes.
Right? I mean, it's all over the place. He was such a master of that instrument, wasn't he? Yeah, anyway.
Preach. Yes, yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, my goodness, stop me, please. Anyway, we're gonna move to non-horn music. And let's get something a little bit different than what we've just heard in the last two selections. We're going to hear again, this is Paul Lewis, because I just can't get enough of Paul Lewis. I can't quit Paul Lewis. And this is what I truly one of the most beautiful pieces I know. This is the Intermezzo Opus 118, number 2, in A major. Paul Lewis, and this is from November 12th of 2017. Here we go.
Nobody?
Good stuff.
It's very restful.
Sorry?
I said that was very restful.
Restful.
Lovely.
Certainly lovely.
When he changes the major and minor, it's not alarming or whatever, but it's very stunning how he does it so beautifully. The way he just
transition.
So what's the quality? What do you think? How do you feel that, it's beautiful, obviously. Right? I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But beyond that,
Hopeful.
hopeful,
Found it romantic.
romantic,
Maybe beautiful memories.
beautiful memories. I like that.
This was from way late in his career, was it not?
Correct. So Brahms, his last opus is 122. This is number 118.
Yeah. Big difference between early music. I used to have a real problem listening to Brahms. I was a young man, which was a long time ago. Brahms' music could really give me a real blue funk. and I had a hard time. I mean, I would get kind of down, and I did not. That's got away from. But it's gone away. That has gone away as I grew older. And I find, at least if we get into orchestral works, I much prefer listening to Brahms symphonies because they have a certain lushness to them and an expansiveness that I can sort of lean back and really enjoy. And the Opus 118 is one of my favorite solo pieces for piano by Brahms.
Yeah.
I think the people play games with the tempo of Brahms. I think I have a recording, the Romanian.
Lupu.
Yeah. Radu Lupu. It seems to me he has a faster tempo to it, which you can, or maybe I'm just, all right, I'm wrong.
That recording,
I listen to,
If you don't own that recording, get that recording.
I have it.
Radu Lupu.
Yeah.
It is really, for me,
Can I call you back in about?
the quintessential interpretation of this piece.
Yeah. Derek,
he's fairly long in years, isn't he?
He just retired.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Of course, do we have to look at the title of the piece? In other words, the notion of what's an intermezzo? No. Okay. I think that this piece goes in a lot of emotional directions, and that's the subtle variations that he gives to a tune that we come to expect. It's really like an ABA again, and yet he's such a craftsperson that he says, you haven't really heard this before. You've heard something like it, but I'm going to vary it just a little bit. I think I'm watching the score here, and I'm looking at the left hand, which can't be. The tune is obviously marvelous, and we can whistle that. But what's going on in the left hand? He exploits the whole lower register of the keyboard, which is really quite marvelous. And then I'm going to ask you, teacher, about hemiola. You told us 2 weeks ago, and I'm wondering if in that middle section, do we have a little hemiola? Do you feel that?
Well, Paul, I will say that Brahms is obsessed with hemiola.
Okay, thank you.
That he does this, and for those who missed what hemiola is, it's when a composer implies a different meter than what is put forth in the music.
Yeah. In that middle section, I felt that where he was doing those quarter notes, right? And suddenly he was saying, what is the meter here?
What is the meter? That's correct. Right. It floats. There's no meter almost.
Right.
Yeah. And this piece, especially in Swafford Jan Swafford calls this piece, calls the late pieces these miniature, pristine, compositional wonderments that influenced generations after him and influenced people like Schoenberg 20 years later in his piano miniatures.
Yeah.
That these compositional techniques that he utilizes, where he's makes harmonic and rhythmic adjustments on beats that you don't expect, are completely and utterly innovative. You know, we can go on and on and on about the craft, and this is what's so funny. You're a pianist and you understand what's happening there, but the sheer emotion of this piece, what I see, and I think what Dan had said, this is an older man looking back on the past, I think. And Helen said the same thing, sort of a very heartfelt reminiscence, almost wistful, looking toward, you know, this a love that was once had. You know, Brahms famously was a bachelor his entire life, and there are many psychological perspectives on why that was. But you know, he had the famous motto with Joachim when they were young men, "Frei aber froh," which means lonely but happy, lonely but free, lonely but free. So he never really, he had romantic entanglements, normally with singers. He had unrequited loves. He came close to marrying once in his life, but never really happened. He liked his cigars. He liked his drink. And, but you hear this heartfelt, this just beautiful, just heart-rendering piece, this little piece. And then the B section, which brings into the minor, and it's a little uncertain and a little bit, well, there's a little storm that's happening, but it's not a big storm. He resolves in major and everything, and then it comes back home to this beauty. And it's really just such an extraordinary late piece. You know, Brahms, you know, Dan spoke about the symphonies. Toward the end of his life, he stopped writing large-scale works. The Fourth Symphony, I wrote it down. The Fourth Symphony was written in 1885, and Brahms died in 1897. And this piece comes along in 1893. He goes to the smaller scale things and expresses sort of in this crystalline way these deep, profound emotions that were, you know, that he had been doing in these larger scale works. He sort of rescinded in his older age to these more intimate expressions.
Derek,
I shouldn't say expressions, more intimate instrumentations.
Derek, can I show you a picture on the wall? You mentioned the cigar.
Yes, that's the famous.
That's the famous picture of Brahms at the piano with the cigar.
Yes. But this is, I think this is Brahms at his very best. And it's, you know, it's a very, this piece, I have the score, I think it's 3 pages, 4, maybe 4 pages. But wow, what happens in these 4 pages? It's, oh, I mean, the first time I heard this piece, I almost cried. I mean, it's just this incredible expression. Yeah, anyway, I'm speechless. Our last piece is another late work of Brahms, the Clarinet Quintet. And we're gonna do again the Adagio, the slow movements. I'm milking the slow stuff tonight. And just, that's kind of how I'm feeling. And this is a performance by the Dover Quartet, as I mentioned previously, and the extraordinary clarinetist Anthony McGill, who's the principal clarinet of the New York Philharmonic, a dear friend, and has been really to the fore in all this unrest that's happening with George Floyd. He started a movement online with a hashtag #TakeTwoKnees, and is encouraging musicians play and express their opposition to what's happening. And NPR picked up the story, and they did a very large story on Anthony, I believe on Friday. But yeah, Anthony is a dear friend of mine, an extraordinary musician, a very important voice in classical music. Unfortunately, this was the last time he was here. It was 2016, which is, hopefully he's coming in 21, 22. I'm working on it. But this is a performance from February 28th, 2016, of the slow movement of the Brahms Clarinet Quintet with Anthony McGill and the Dover String Quartet.
Okay, okay, Derek. I'll tell you just quickly, the first part of it, it's ABA again, basically. And the first and third part really seem to be kind of a lullaby almost. It's almost, but then in the middle part, which gets very dramatic and the clarinet riffs off, it sounds like a bedtime story that's, you know, kind of dark and exciting. And then at the end comes this absolutely 3/4 little lullaby again. It's a magnificent story built into this movement. Thank you.
Expertly played.
Yeah, the playing is really the clarinetist is really outstanding. It's just beautiful, and of course the melody is overpoweringly beautiful, and these shifts from 4 rhythm to the 3 rhythm, which are almost they're perceptible, but they're so natural that you feel that they flow one into one another. Each sets the other one off so beautifully. I mean, the da dee da, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in 4, not even realizing it, and then back. It's again that craftsmanship that several people were alluding to. It's a great piece of music and a beautiful performance.
Well, I love the harmonic complexity. You know, even when it's in its major key sections, which, you know, theoretically should, you know, just more kind of, you know, optimism and you know, happiness. I mean, like, you're always kind of, you know, there's always something, I don't know, whether it's sad or wistful. I mean, it always, you know, quickly moderates to something that, you know, there's always one foot, it seems, you know, just kind of, you know, dragging, you know, something weighty or sad or forlorn or something. But I love it, you know. It's not this kind of, I don't know. I mean, like, it could otherwise be, you know, kind of like superficial happy or just, you know, happy in the major section and you know, a little bit more emotionally complex in the minor section. But he never lets you stay, you know, kind of comfortable in one feeling. And I actually appreciate that about it.
It always, Brian, what you're saying, it always has that kind of melancholy quality, even when it's kind of soaring, right? Yeah.
I think what Brian said was a great comment. You know, even in the stormy, when the clarinet, which evokes, I think, almost a bohemian gypsy obligato wailing of, you know, of intensity, it resolves in major every time it comes back. It's a heavy minor. Da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da da dee, and it's major. So there's this optimism, even in that very dramatic minor of the clarinet wail. It resolves in this major. So I see this as this, you know, obviously the tenderness of this theme, I mean, it's just sheer, just profound, icy love, and then this angst that happens in the clarinet, and I feel like the clarinet's wailing, you know, and declamatory and everything, but it always resolves at the last second in major. And Brahms, and that's Brahms, he has that melancholy. And I'll get back to autumnal, which is what Paul had said. And that's why Brahms is fantastic, because there's always a touch of melancholy with his music. And I was very purposeful in choosing music that was not perky tonight, that wasn't allegro, wasn't, you know, for me, it's these autumnal emotions and these feelings in the slow movements that really just grab me and just pull me in and just take me away to another place. And Dan alluded, you know, you can get, you know, if you don't understand the complexity of emotion, of human emotion, you can get sad, right? I mean, it's the sadness, but it's not sadness. It's sadness with, and not just full, you know, there's nothing, there's an optimism and a love and a, you know, just a wholehearted embracing of the emotion that is in Brahms. And I think that's what draws us to it. And especially these late works. I always see these late works. You know, Brahms famously with this piece and with the trio, with the clarinet trio, Brahms had retired essentially. He hadn't composed a piece for about a year. And the composer, the conductor and pianist Hans von Bülow invited him to a concert in Meiningen to listen to a clarinetist who played the Weber, believe the second concerto, whose name was Richard Mühlfeld. And Brahms, who hadn't composed in a year, was so inspired by this musician that he immediately went and started composing again, and composed this extraordinary quintet. He composed the trio, the piano trio with clarinet, and then 2 sonatas, clarinet sonatas. And just out of sheer inspiration from this artist. And it's, you know, clarinetists, I was speaking as a horn player, we don't have a lot of repertoire. Clarinetists don't have a lot of repertoire. But clarinet especially, you've got these late Brahms works that are just the most incredible works written for your instrument. And then in turn, you have Mozart, who found a clarinetist, Anton Stadler. Anton Stadler, toward the end of Mozart's career, wrote the clarinet quintet and wrote the clarinet concerto, 2 just extraordinary works for clarinet. At the end, you know, when these composers were at the height of their abilities, and they get these masterworks, these stupid clarinetists that have these great works. I'm so jealous. You know, it's so marvelous. And here's Brahms continuing to innovate, where there's almost this recitative in the middle of this movement, in the B section and the minor section, but still resolves each quotation in major. And just, it's just so wonderful.
Major.
Sorry?
You welcome the major when it comes.
You welcome the major, but that's, you can't have lightness without the dark, right?
Right.
You just can't, you know, that's life. I mean, that's, you know, that's what it is. You don't know what happiness is until you have sadness. So Brahms embodies this. And this, you know, people talk about, you know, Brahms was born in Hamburg, which is northern port of Germany, just below Schleswig-Holstein. And, you know, there's a Hamburger sort of aesthetic where there's a little touch of sadness. That's a sort of quality Germans find within the Hamburgers. And I think it's prevalent throughout Brahms's career that he has this, that there's always this, just a touch of it. It's not overwhelming everything, but it's there. And it's wistful. And it comes out especially in these late works, where I believe he's so reflective. He's looking back and just pouring out these emotions onto the page. And we're the better for it. I mean, it's, you know, Brahms, spending an hour and 20 minutes on Brahms, you know, there's so much. I mean, I encourage you to, you know, it's hard for me as a programmer, as a presenter, where I present set groups. And sometimes it's hard for me to program the mixed chamber music of Brahms, the piano quartets, the piano trios. They're so good. I mean, they're so amazing. You know, I worry in my programming, and the reason why I don't do it is that oftentimes they're just not rehearsed enough. You combine a pianist and a group, and they come together, and it's sometimes just slapped together, and it misses sometimes. And I shouldn't shy away from it, but I've been burned when I've done it, and I shy away from it because I respect the repertoire so much that it kills me if I sit in a hall and I don't feel that this music is being paid proper attention. So if you're unfamiliar with the chamber music, because I'm not presenting it, I'm sorry, please explore it. There are wonderful recordings. The old Beaux-Arts trio with Walter Trampler are the Brahms quartets. They're wonderful recordings. The trios, they're marvelous, and they should all be explored. And also these late piano, the Opus 116, which is never done. It's rarely done. They're wonderful works. Opus 116, 117, 118, 119, these piano pieces, it comprises about 20 piano pieces, short pieces. They're just jewels. They're absolute jewels. And if you can find Lupu's recordings, that's where I'd go. But there are many others, I mean, that are wonderful too. I can't, I shouldn't discriminate, but that Lupu 118 recording is a recording that I listen to at least once a month, and I've done it now for the past 10 years. I mean, it's just that good. It's just really, it's a great recording. So, any other thoughts?
Derek, I just wanted to mention one thing. You talked earlier about the Wigmore Hall concerts.
Yes.
And those are online.
Yes.
Permanently. So you don't have to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning or watch it at 8 o'clock in the morning. You can watch them at any time.
Oh, good. No, I'm sorry. I've been watching them with breakfast. Yes. Where are they available, John? I only
Wigmore Live. If people just go onto their whatever search engine they want to use and type in Wigmore Live, and they're there. And they started last week with Stephen Huff.
Yes.
And
today was Stephen Isserlis.
And today was Stephen Isserlis.
Today was Isserlis.
Yeah.
And
yes.
we're going through, Paul is on Wednesday, and Imogen Cooper is in a couple weeks. And they end with, as you know, with Mark Padmore and some gal named Uchida, I think.
Yes.
So.
So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Wigmore Hall is in London and is, for me, the leading presenter of what I do in the world. The breadth of that program is just ridiculous. They bring every major chamber musician, singer, pianist into that series. And Wigmore Hall in London is, for me, the standard bearer of what I do. So they've just started. They've been welcoming local London musicians. There's obviously a lot of wonderful musicians in London. And John Galuli, who runs the series, is a very learned human being and speaks between the pieces, and they're wonderful. They're wonderful. So go on Wigmore Hall, wigmorehall.co.uk probably, right? And check it out. It's great stuff. And for me, it's been just great to wake up in the morning and hear these live performances of great artists. So, but be sure to check out these interviews that Carnegie Hall has been doing with certain artists, with Manny Axe, have been really lovely too. And Paul is on that, tomorrow at 2 p.m. So Manny Axe is interviewing Paul Lewis, and then Paul is going to play a few of the Beethoven bagatelles, I believe Opus 126. So there you go. All right, everybody. What do you say?
Thank
you.
Thanks,
Thanks so much for coming back. I've been working very diligently on my radio program, and I'll give you a little teaser. I just came up with the topic, and I'm going to be talking about Schubert and his role in the as a bridge to Romanticism.
Wow.
And that's going to be my first radio program, which I don't know the date that it's coming out. I'm producing it right now, but it should be by the end of the month, but I'll keep you all posted. Okay?
Very good.
Great. Thank you all so much again. Thank you. We'll see you next week, Monday.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.